Oh my goodness, we get 7. What was this game? You know, Sharn might still be the most fun you can have in this game, bro. This ship is crazy. Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're playing one of the most fun ships in the entire game, Scharnhorst. Even all these years later, it's still an absolute beast and one of my favorites to play if I'm not having a great day to just go Brawl at mid-tier. Yes, mid-tier is very important here as people tend to play pretty far back in high tier these days, meaning this sort of close range brawler playstyle not going to work out so well. We also find at higher tier, we don't have the speed and maneuverability of a Scharnhorst, let alone this threefold threat between the main guns being reasonably accurate and having decent secondaries and torpedoes. A lot of the time, you become this slower, tankier, clunkier battleship, or you lose a lot of the armor of this Scharnhorst at its tier. So I find it to be very unique, actually, and extremely fun. If you're interested, we're playing the B variant, which is on sale right now, but of course you should go for the Scharnhorst 43, which is available for coal, completely for free just by playing the game. Now let's talk about how you should be playing a ship like this one for the most fun. Of course, pushing is ideal, but there's a lot to stop you from pushing these days. In this one, I was thinking about where the majority of the enemy team was. Pushing around a corner on 3 enemy ships is possible in a Scharnhorst. It is that good in a Brawl. However, it's not possible if most of the enemy team was coming to this flank. On this map, it tends to play more towards the C and D caps. And by the time we got to this corner, I noticed most of the enemy team was over there. This is something you really need to think about when you're playing these brawling ships. And we're also keeping ourselves angled to the 2 battleships on this flank, trying to focus down the cruiser, who can potentially burst us down. And with these Scharnhorst guns, we're not doing a ton of damage to battleships. It's better to go after cruisers with these guns. Landing some torpedoes at close range here, keeping an eye on our angle to the New Mexico. We'll finish off the Boise and then get the torps in on the New Mexico. Having torpedoes is so much fun in these brawling situations. You basically never have to worry about getting rammed, as you can always turn and get these torpedoes off. It's one of the most fun parts of this ship, getting in these extremely close range brawls and then having these torps to deal with enemy capital ships. Your guns are going to do decent damage, but nowhere near battleship level. They're battle cruiser guns mostly, and best to deal with lighter armored targets, so that's where these torpedoes are just so much fun to use. I think Sharn 43 is a little better in these brawling situations, I gotta say, which is cool because that's the free ship, right? It's got a little bit better secondary DPM, more importantly, sets more fires consistently, and the torps have a way faster cooldown. And you get a 15% engine boost on that one. But don't feel like you need to go get Sharn 43 if you already have this regular version, because it's still most of that same playstyle. And in fact, the main guns are more consistent on this one. A little better reload, but more importantly, we have short fuses on these ones, where the Sharn 43 has regular fuse times, leading to many more overpens. I find regular Scharnhorst gets much better value out of its main guns, especially into cruisers at these tiers, especially down tiers like we're getting. They're pretty narrow, the cruisers we're fighting, so overpens can be quite common. Now that we've dealt with this flank, it's time to push spawn? No, we're gonna go towards the islands here in the middle. We're kind of still pushing spawn since this flank is so divided in half, but I'm trying my best to use island cover. Now, do you go full send all the time with Scharnhorst? You can, but I don't think it's going to work out in every battle. It worked out here because there's a few things I'm often looking for to give me the green light to full push. One of them being just, are there torpedo threats on the enemy team? Is there a destroyer that's going to take me out very quickly if I decide to push out on my own like that? In this case, there wasn't. Is there a carrier? Probably don't push in that scenario. Same with submarines. And as well, I'm looking for crossfires. That's why I brought up the enemy team's positioning earlier on in this video. When they're all clustered towards the C and D cap, they can't provide a lot of support and crossfire. That's one of the reasons you shouldn't be pushing spawns, is that as soon as you break out from your flank, pushing towards the enemy spawn, trying to finish off that last remaining ship on that flank, you're so often broadside on to the entire rest of the enemy team that's in the middle of the map, and then you get caught in a crossfire. So that's why I really don't like pushing spawns. In this case though, we get to go back towards some more island cover and continue pushing onwards. we need to give a little bit more broadside than comfortable to use all of our secondary DPM, which is decent, okay? Scharnhorst has this more normal German battleship, or at least like the Preußen line German battleship secondary accuracy. Not as accurate as Schlieffen, but a little better than the standard battleship secondary accuracy, so it's well worth using them. You're going to give 39 degrees of broadside forward, 38 degrees of broadside backwards to make use of them all. Fortunately, Scharnhorst is very maneuverable, so we're able to use all of that secondary DPM and still angle in time. I think one of the really nice things too is the main guns have just a 20-second reload with 2.0 Sigma battleship dispersion, 9 guns. It's so much more consistent than Gneisenau. It's less good into battleships, of course, because Gneisenau gets those 380s. But if those don't hit, which most of the time they're not, Scharnhorst is just so much better. Personally, I do enjoy this ship so much more than the Gneisenau. And it's fast too, that's the other thing. You get through the map so much quicker. You're not out of position nearly as often. When you decide to push, it's going to be so much more effective because you can get through these situations so much quicker. I absolutely love having Scharnhorst in my port, and taking out like this again, it's been a little while to be honest with you since I've played Scharnhorst. I'm mostly trying to brawl at higher tier. And it's hard to brawl at higher tier, guys. You get punished so much more often than you do at tier 7. So if you're interested in just having a good time, I think Scharnhorst is one of the best. Bit of a yoink there for our Kraken, okay? I'll admit it. But maybe this next one isn't so much of a yoink. New Orleans is going very broadside to us. And 2.0 Sigma battleship dispersion. Here we're actually running accuracy build. I'm not running the full secondary build, and that is why right there. I love having those kinds of salvos. When someone makes a mistake and goes broadside at close range like that, I want to feel like I can consistently punish them, okay? And this ship, we'll take a look at a secondary build soon, full secondary build. We still get 8.3 kilometers of range on these secondaries with decent accuracy still. Most of the time when you're brawling, you're within 8.3 kilometers anyway, so the extra you get to 9.5 is pretty minor benefit for the downside of losing out on dispersion for your main guns. So that's why these days I am mostly running hybrid build, even on the secondary focused battleships, because your main guns are still going to give you the majority of your damage, even though with a ship like this one, we do have 3 legitimate threats that we can go after. And this really helps us out a ton into up tiers where, let's be honest, we're not full sending a flank like that nearly as often. It can happen, but oftentimes you're not going to get away with that. So playing a little further back, taking your time to assess the battle, and then pushing in the late game is typically how you're going to have to roll with this ship in the up tier. And having the main gun accuracy for those games is extremely valuable. And we still get great value out of these torpedoes and secondaries too, even when we're not running a full secondary brawler build. I haven't actually spec'd too much into extra healing here, as unfortunately for Scharnhorst, we don't have any extra gimmicks as far as heal cooldown. You know, a 40-second heal cooldown will go pretty nuts on a ship like this one, as well as not having the fast acting damage controls. So timing your pushes is going to be extremely important in a ship like this one. The other things I'm looking out for is island cover, right? We want to be catching checkpoints, especially in a ship like this one that doesn't have that fast cooldown on either the damage control or the heal. 80 seconds doesn't seem like a long time, and yet between heals, it feels like forever. So you need to have checkpoints where you can duck in behind an island, go dark, and not be shot at for a little while. And then after you've healed up a little bit, you can jump back in and brawl again. That is the key to getting the most out of a Scharnhorst. You can just full YOLO, one heal it, and it's going to do all right. But if you want to get the most out of this ship, you need to find ways of surviving longer at these closer ranges. Excellent work by the main guns in this one. This is another great reason to go for the main gun build. Even in brawls, having your main guns do this much damage is really, really nice. And we'll collect our 7th kill, 200k damage in this one. Yeah, I had a pretty good time with Scharnhorst playing this battle. It doesn't always look like this for me, okay? I played many more games, and some of the up tiers were a little bit hard to deal with. Certainly double carrier games or very difficult for this ship as it doesn't have the best AA. What we also don't have is a Hydro, okay? And this is going to rely a lot on your intuition. This battle is a full up tier. Look at how long we've been in this battle for a minute, okay? It's been about 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes, and now I'm making my push with most of the enemy team on this flank behind islands, trying to isolate fights here, right? We're also running the full secondary build, so we're getting at 9.5 kilometers of range. But already this Wu Jing is well within the hybrid build range, which is, again, why I like that one so much more these days. It also results in a little bit better consistency out of those main guns. But trying to isolate fights like this, right? There is a Los Andes in the middle, but our team has kind of steamrolled it through that one. But this is what I'm looking for. Opportunities to push, using islands as checkpoints, isolating 1v1s, and then trying to deal with torps is very difficult. Enemy Scharnhorst 43, our counterpart with like a 45-second reload on its torpedoes. Kind of insane. Our reload is still respectable at 68 seconds. But that's another reason Scharn 43 is a little more fun. You get the ridiculous near Vermont level reload on torpedoes alongside having an engine boost to make you go so much quicker. It's like 180-second duration base on that thing for 15% better engine power is wild and really, really fun. But here we're going to try to predict his torpedo pattern, right? Scharnhorst is going to go broadside for his torpedoes to go after us. Our turtleback going to help us survive these broadside salvos. And yes, we're going to predict those torps very well. Getting into these brawling situations, you do need to think about when the enemy ship is torping you and try your best to just get out of the way. Try to be unpredictable, right? That's another thing here. It's very obvious what this enemy Scharnhorst is trying to do here. And especially when we're brawling, predictability is often going to result in us eating a lot of torpedoes. No Hydro does make this harder, but learning this intuition of when you're getting torped at, and when perhaps there's an enemy destroyer that hasn't been spotted that could be torping at you, Scharnhorst is very quick and very maneuverable. So there's no harm in playing with your rudder and speed during these brawls, but also when you're crossing over major choke points. These are the kind of things to look out for. We're going to help take out the Scharnhorst 43. There's his extra torpedoes. Another reason that we decided to kite from that Scharn 43. I'm not too worried about a ram necessarily, but I didn't want to take an easy torpedo trade. And having that turtleback at close range is extremely useful for avoiding those situations. I just love how many options I have at closer ranges to deal with enemy ships. And I really have a good time with Scharnhorst like that. Here in the middle of two brothers, you know, I had to include one. If I get this opportunity, I have to try it, right? Enemy Königsberg broadside, and I've been talking up the main guns, and then they go and do that on me. It's still battleship dispersion, okay? You're gonna get trolled from time to time. But pretty obvious torpedoes, right? I see a lot of people full sending their way through the middle choke point here, and I wanna put forth that you're way better off sitting in the channel here, applying just a little pressure here and there. You're going to distract so many of the enemy team, or if you don't, then you can poke your nose out a little bit here and there. But we're distracting more than enough of the enemy team that I don't want to push out any further. The torp threat is a little too much here, as well as getting shot at by multiple ships gets you killed a lot sooner, okay? We want to isolate those fights as much as we can. So waiting here tends to work out a little better, even in a ship like Scharnhorst where we want to be on the move. It's maneuverable enough, it's got decent armor when we're maneuvering and dodging shells. That's where it's at its best, but we can still play this more stationary role on islands. Doesn't have to be necessarily the middle channel of two brothers. It can be any of these islands close to cap zones, things like that a lot of radar cruisers want to go to. Scharnhorst can apply a lot of pressure to these spots and slowly reverse in and out of taking fire, firing at the enemy team, and then ducking back into cover when you need to heal. And that is going to keep you alive a lot longer towards the late game when maybe that pushing opportunity does open up a little bit easier. But also it may make the enemy team make a few mistakes when they're trying to get that torp angle on you or finally try and get a massive salvo into you. They might over push to try and greed some damage into you. Scharnhorst may not have a Hydro, but we do have a spotter plane here, allowing us to get some plane spotting and know where that enemy Königsberg is. That's the main threat here, is those torpedoes. We nearly finished him off with that first salvo or second salvo into him. And now that the torps have passed, we know he's kind of tucked in behind a cove. Now I'm willing to start thinking about pushing. It's patience, okay? A lot of brawling is patience, and it's difficult, okay? Because I know you want to get in there and have that fun right away. It's not always going to let you have that fun right away. A little bit of patience goes a long way. We've dealt with the torpedo threat. Now it's just a Dunkirk here. Perhaps the Flint could be a threat later on, but we haven't seen him for a little while. It's definitely time to push at this point. But it took me a while. I went to the channel right away, and we still are like 7.5 minutes into this battle. So a lot of patience in this one. Fortunately, Scharnhorst has great acceleration and maneuverability. The turret traverse is excellent, allowing us to deal with multiple threats very quickly too. You don't always get that on brawling battleships, the fast turret traverse, and it helps so much. Here we're broadside enough that AP would have hurt. Fortunately, still on that HE. But do we damage control, right? We have a heal coming up, so maybe we don't need to. And hopefully we can finish off this Dunkirk before he gets to his next salvo. I'm going to try and aim up into his superstructure. You got to look for some of these flat plates. Like, look where I'm about to aim right now. It's not a very angled plate to us at that moment, allowing us for a lot of full pounds. We take the heal, and now, well, the Flint is got some pretty scary torpedoes. We don't know where they're coming from, but a lot of people, I think, would just push straight out of this island gap. Instead, we're going to go between the Dunkirk and the island here, potentially letting us deal with some torpedoes by letting them hit the Dunkirk instead of us. That didn't happen in this one, but it's well worth trying some of these unconventional routes around islands and between island cover, because that's going to avoid most of the torpedoes anyway. And in fact, there come those torpedoes right away. They were designed to go for that middle choke point, because either we go straight out the middle and probably eat those torps, or we stop in that mid choke point like I had been doing a little further back in that middle gap, and we probably eat those torps too. But pushing out and turning in instantly like that, it's not as expected. So it allowed us to avoid some of that torp damage. We do get lit on a double fire after using our damage control here. Probably should have used that damage control a little bit later or waited on it. But instead, we are going to burn out. The torps will get the Flint, though, and that was an absolutely excellent brawl coming through the middle of two brothers. There is so much fun to be had with Scharnhorst. Just not playing high tier opens up the game so much for some of these pushing, more fun brawling plays. So if you're like me, maybe give your Scharnhorst a go and hope you get the tier 7 matchmaker, because tier 9 is harder. You got to be a little more patient, but you can make it work still. It may not be meta-defining or as powerful as it once was relative to its competition, but I was really glad to see Scharnhorst performing so well today. And overall, just having a blast in this ship again. Tier 7 seems to be a great tier to play. Tier 9s get up-tiered so often into super ships that I didn't see as many of those full up-tiers. That results in a lot more fun games. Tier 8s are manageable to deal with in Scharnhorst, especially because it's a tier 7 battleship that has 50 millimeters of deck armor and 45 upper belt. So many of the battleships at this tier only get 26 everywhere. That means they're overmatched by all the battleships that they're facing. It's really difficult to play them. Scharnhorst still has so much extra armor. And yeah, we do have a larger superstructure, kind of that typical German weakness on some of these brawling battleships. It's so much faster and more maneuverable than the standard German brawling battleships that a lot of the time people are going to be missing this superstructure anyway. Concealment's all right. Our AA is rather terrible, I would say, but having these torps and secondaries is just so much fun. I really would recommend you try out the hybrid build here, getting yourself that 8.3 kilometers of range. That's still really good secondary range. 9.5 is great, but you give up a lot of consistency on the main guns. And I found that to be not worth the trade-off these days. Certainly 2.0 Sigma Battleship Dispersion on these 283s works great into cruisers in particular. The HE does okay, but we're running IFHE on this build, resulting in not the best fire chance, and the alpha damage is not amazing either. So I stuck with AP most of the time. Here's the build that I was running. Notice no extra healing, because oftentimes I'm just not getting to it, right? I'm waiting for my time to push, and then I'm full sending it in, right? Or getting to the next island, and then slowly pushing up like that. That doesn't lend itself to taking little bits of damage consistently throughout the game. I am either playing pretty safe on an island, waiting for an opportunity, or I'm going in. And you're not getting 5 heals most of the time with that anyway. So I'd rather fire prevention, I'd rather concealment, and then I'd rather the extra damage from these secondaries. That's kind of the thought process there. As for the upgrades here, taking steering gears, interestingly enough, I find this ship accelerates rather quickly anyway without it, and especially if you do the Scharnhorst 43 version, you got that crazy engine boost to give you acceleration anyway, and having 11.6 second rudder shift time makes it feel much more like a cruiser, certainly a battle cruiser, than a battleship. I really want to emphasize that. It's not the same as the standard battleship line or the higher tier battleship brawling ships that do feel quite sluggish at times. This feels much more nimble, and I had a lot of fun because of that. Aiming systems here, at least with the hybrid build, you can swap between them. That's another nice thing, is the commander stays relatively the same and you can just swap between these two. I was still running auxiliary armaments. Probably should have gone either main armaments mod or even damage control party mod, since we no longer have to worry about the secondaries and torpedoes being permanently destroyed. That is so nice, especially for the torps. You know, if you've played some of these German brawling battleships, that the torps that are on the deck armor like that often get destroyed very quickly, permanently in a battle, and then you no longer have them. A massive help for these ships is that those no longer get permanently destroyed. It's a really fun ship. You guys probably do that, but this is your reminder that Scharnhorst is still excellent here in 2025. It's not so power crept. Maybe that's just down to being mid-tier. We haven't seen quite so much power creep down there, and so that allows Scharnhorst to still shine in 2025. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.